This is your host, Jonathan Frederick. Today's interview is really interesting. I want to provide you guys with a background on the happenings of scheduling this interview. Firstly, back in probably May, I reached out to Thomas and invited him to be a guest on the Heart Healthy Hustle. And he was really cool in his response. He actually sent me a very detailed email explaining why he would be a guest on the show, but not yet because I had not launched the show yet. Completely understandable. So he said he would be interested in being a guest if and when I passed the 10 episode threshold. So once I hit 10, actually it was 11, I contacted him and I said, hey, past 10, now it's time for us to have it. No, I'm just kidding. I said, yeah, here I've done 10 to 11 episodes and love to have you on the show if you're still open to it. He agreed. We scheduled the interview, and that's what you're about to hear. I want to give you guys 3 things that you're going to learn in this interview before starting it. One, for the start of the interview, all the way through about 20 minutes or so, you're going to hear Thomas's story. So the interesting thing about this, it's very interesting how it all came about. You're going to hear his entrepreneurial journey, and you're going to hear what his big break, so to speak, was. If you have ever wondered how certain YouTubers got to where they are, listen to the full interview and you will get a good idea as to why Thomas is where he is. You'll also hear the unique happenings in his story and his journey. I find it very fascinating. And number 2, you're going to learn Thomas's greatest success and his greatest failure. You're also going to hear about consistency. You're going to hear about how he stays consistent and why. Number 3, you're going to hear a lot of tactical information on how to connect with others as entrepreneurs in meaningful ways, and other tactical information that will just help your workflow, help increase your productivity, and just a good time, a good conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle podcast, where business owners learn to thrive as we strive. On this show, we sit down with industry-leading experts about developing self-awareness, impacting your niche, and striving to live the best life possible. Our mission is to encourage ambitious pursuits in a heart-healthy way through intentional conversation and increasing self-awareness. Why heart healthy? Because burnout and stress are global epidemics. We're discussing tools that help you to navigate business ownership successfully. So whether you're driving to or from work right now, exercising, eating, or simply relaxing, come hang out and get ready to enjoy another inspiring episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle Show. Welcome back, everybody, to another inspiring episode of the Heart Healthy Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Frederick. Today's guest is somebody who I discovered through the YouTube search a ways back. His name is Thomas Frank, and Thomas Frank is an eclectic individual with many skills. He is a productivity expert and the founder of collegeinfogeek.com. He helps students as well as productive high achievers to maximize their results. His YouTube channel has garnered over 54.2 million views and over 1.1 million subscribers. What he's sharing is helping thousands of proactive people all over the world. Thomas, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, man. Thanks for that great intro.
Yeah, for sure. You got to let it rip once the intro starts.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I don't think I've had anybody introduce me as an eclectic individual, but that is 100% correct.
Good. So we usually start out the show with a success quote that you live by. Go ahead and share that and what it means to you.
So I'll start with my favorite one. Bruce Lee once said, adapt what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And I love that quote because as somebody who is sort of in the business of giving advice, and as somebody who takes advice from a lot of people, I'm very keenly aware of the fact that advice is not always useful for every single person that hears it, because every single person is at a different point in their journey and they're doing something a little bit different. So just to give you a really simple example, if somebody who is an incredibly successful businessman has 30 years in the industry, whatever industry it is, has 50 people working for them, has totally learned the benefits of delegation and focus multipliers and all that kind of stuff, tells me, hey, you really need to hire yourself an assistant. That's a great piece of advice for me right now because I have enough money to afford that and I am working with a surplus of money and a deficit of time. if I were to hear that piece of advice as a brand new entrepreneur who's in complete garage scrappy mode, trying to save every single penny, that's actually a terrible piece of advice. So regardless of what you are doing and regardless of what the piece of advice is, you have to filter it through your own life experience and, knowing what part of the journey you are currently in, to ask yourself, is that actually useful for me? Or is that somebody who is just sharing something that has been useful for them and I'm not there yet? Or maybe I'm in a completely different area and they just don't understand what I'm doing well enough. The other quote, a line from one of the songs by the rapper Logic that I was thinking of today. And he just says, I treated everyone with respect and now I'm rich. And I just love that, because one thing I was talking about with a good friend of mine recently is that you can't call somebody nice sincerely if they are only nice when it is easy. Because I think almost everyone in the world, barring the few jerks out there, is nice when it is easy. But when they're stressed, when they're frustrated, when someone has just insulted them or frustrated them, that is when the true test is administered. That is when you get to see, are they a nice person? Or am I now going to see their true colors? Because it's so much easier to lash out, be defensive, be snarky, and a truly nice person is going to treat everyone with respect, realize that any perceived slight is almost always coming from a position of ignorance or stress on the part of the person who said it, and they're going to respond respectfully. And I was struck by that lyric in the song, because I realized, like, if you can live your life that way, that's going to open so many more doors for you, and it's going to ensure that many doors continue to stay open well into the future in your career. And you might get rich.
Well said. That's a great quote. Keyword, respect. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you like who or what you are respecting, but you are just being a person of integrity at that moment. So you don't have to be like, wow, I really like this person, I'll respect you. But our society today at large, that's a big struggle. And most people say, oh, I'm a nice person. Well, I'll tell you guys, and Thomas, you too, I've worked door-to-door sales for 2 years straight. Now, that's where you see people's true colors when they answer the door, because they already feel justified in cursing you off their step, which I totally understand. I don't take it personal. It actually never happened. But my point is, as good as so many people have been, the overwhelming response is neutral to negative. So I always, ambiguity is always met with negativity initially. It's a verbose way of saying, if they don't know you, they're going to feel weird about you at first. Yeah, I really like that quote. I vibe with that a lot. Thomas, I'm really interested to hear a brief story of how you started your business, College Info Geek. Were you a great student in the past, or were you actually just a businessman turned almost online, not tutor, but like you said, you're providing a ton of advice and you're really helping people. Going through a bunch of your content recently, and I saw in the comments, people were commenting, hey, like I didn't do great last semester. This semester I implemented your videos, been following you, and I got straight A's. And I'd love to hear how that feels to you, and also a brief story of how your business got started.
Yeah, man, I love getting that kind of feedback. It is one of the things that drives me and gives me energy. And I think if I were to try to boil down my core mission in life, it would be to help people become more independently capable. So I don't want to teach people what to think. I don't want to teach people exactly what to do. I want to give them mental and real world tools and show them how to use it more effectively. So the history of College Info Geek, the way this got started was in my freshman year of college, two things happened. Firstly, I came into college as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman, and every incoming freshman goes through the campus tours, and they go through the period where you have to sign up for your very first semester of classes. So there were these people called Cyclonades. At Iowa State University, we were the Cyclones, and we're better than the Hawkeyes. And the Cyclonades were basically the student orientation assistants, and they helped you basically get set up for the semester. As an incoming freshman, I thought these people were the coolest people on campus, and I asked immediately, hey, how do I become one of you guys? And they said, well, about halfway through the semester, you can apply, and if you get picked, you'll go through an entire semester training during the spring, and then next summer, you will assume the mantle of the Cyclonade and, steal the shirt off my back because I'll be done. So I did that. I got accepted. And I proceeded to spend the entire next semester learning everything there was to know about my campus and my university, but also everything that a student might ask. So I was trained on a lot of academic questions. I was trained on how to deal with homesickness, all kinds of stuff that are common issues for students. And at the same time, I was pretty ambitious. I wanted to have a great college career, and I was trying to make sure that I covered all my bases and had a great college career in all dimensions. So I was reading a lot of blogs. That started out with Lifehacker, which is, just a great general purpose life hacks blog. And then I eventually stumbled across one called Hack College. And this was started by 2 college students, and they were in California, I think. But they also had a team of writers and editors from universities all across the country. And their shtick basically was, this is a for students by students publication. So I was reading it during my entire freshman year, and then end of my freshman year comes, I see a post pop up on their site saying, we are actually kicking our founders off of the writing team because we're for students by students. And that means we need new writers. So apply, send us a guest post, send us your resume, whatever you want to send us, and we're going to be picking a new writing team. And as somebody who was looking for opportunities to bolster my resume, I thought that looks like something that would look great on a resume. It might be fun. I'm going to do it. So I stayed up all night writing this guest post for them, submitted it, and ended up getting rejected. So I'm sitting on this guest post that I poured hours of time into and thinking to myself, if they don't accept me, why don't I just make my own website? I think it was the same night as a rejection. I Googled, how do I make my own blog? I bought the domain collegeinfogeek.com, and it's going to be mainly for information systems majors. And I just put up my post. I learned how to set up WordPress with their famous 5-minute install, got hosting, and just made it sort of a hobby blog. Shortly after that, a friend joined me. So for the first year, College Info Geek was a dual author blog. He was interested in nothing but Linux and Android. So he wrote a bunch of Linux and Android articles, and I wrote college success articles. And then eventually he left, and I kind of went solo. It was really, really small and really just a hobby blog for about a year. I remember I had a guest post on Hack College because I ended up becoming friends with them in the intervening year, and it brought in 90 visitors on one day, and I was so excited about it. And then I think it was May of the next year, so about 11 months after I started the blog, I wrote a post where I basically documented this project that I was doing where I wanted to build a desk that hung from chains off of my loft bed because I wanted to get as much space under the desk as possible. And I was like, well, why not just hang it off the loft bed? So I took pictures, I put the blog up, and then Hack College did one of those little almost like reblog kind of things. They were like, hey, check this out, go to College Info Geek. And then Lifehacker reblogged their reblog and brought in a ton of traffic.
Wow.
So that was sort of like the big break. After that, I was like, okay, I'm going to go hard on this now. And I wrote probably 30 articles a month for 3 or 4 months and just poured every minute of time I had into writing and learning how to code and learning how to customize the website, all that stuff. And even at that point, I had really no plans of it being a career. I just wanted to make it as cool as possible to look great on my resume and hopefully help me, do something cool in the future. And then over the next year, that's when I started learning about some of the online business stuff. I started learning about how to monetize it. Slowly but surely started growing income until I think it was about 6 months before graduation. I was at the point where it would have constituted a full-time income for me. So that was stage 1. Building the blog, learning how to monetize it, and building it up to the point where it became a career. And honestly, I had completely planned to keep it as sort of a hobby and move to Minneapolis and try to work as a web developer after college. And the only thing that stopped me was meeting a girl who I ended up dating, and I'm still dating, who was a sophomore at the time. And I didn't want to leave her, so I decided to stay in Iowa and try to run my business full time. It was kind of cool, actually, because I got to stay with my friends. Yeah, that's sort of when I went like truly full time on it.
Okay.
2013 is where I added the podcast. 2014, I think late 2014 is where I started really getting serious about YouTube. And ever since then, I've been a YouTuber first and everything else kind of second.
I was watching your interview with Pat Flynn recently, and in part 2, where you guys are sitting down, you are talking about how and why you got into YouTube as opposed to just being a vlogger. Love for you to touch on that briefly, but first I want to pull out 2 things from what you just shared in your story, which key takeaways there was the power of hope, realizing that you could compete. When you saw that Lifehacker shared or reshared the share off of your blog, you just said you started to go really hard. So for me, I had a YouTube channel probably 3 years ago, and I posted almost 200 videos, and it never really took off or anything. So I put it on the side. I got a lot of fun out of that. I really enjoyed it. And I go back a year later, and one of the videos is ranking for a certain topic. And I saw that, and like in comparison to my other videos of like, 100 views, 40 views, and like I put so much content, like seeing the one video actually rank, I was like, oh my goodness, like that's actually a pretty good video. It's actually a pretty good video. And that's part of the reason I started to go hard into the podcasting scene, was because I realized like, hey, I can actually compete. Just keep putting out a bunch of stuff, guys, and you never know what'll happen. I would love to hear about, I think a lot of people can find that content on your YouTube channel, like why you got into YouTube more fully. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what is it due to the power of that algorithm and how much more discoverable your content would be?
Not really, actually. Though that has been a great ancillary benefit. And I've sort of realized now that YouTube offers something that most other types of content don't offer you. And that is that algorithm. And it's very difficult to sort of get it on your side at first. But once it's there, I mean, what else do you have in the world that will push your content to people who do not follow you? Instagram, it's purely your audience. And then, a select few people know how to use that Explore tab well, but that's tough. And your blog, maybe you rank something on Google. That's definitely something that I look into. But otherwise, there's not really a whole lot of people that are just going to know to go to your domain. There's no like universal blog homepage that's going to recommend it. But same thing with the podcast. Like you have to hustle to get people to listen to your podcast. There's no organic algorithmic promotion there. So YouTube has been great in that regard. But the reason I got into it at first was I saw the guys over at Fizzle.co, which they're good friends of mine. They just took a piece of video from one of their courses. They put it up in a blog post and they said, we're just going to have this here as a way to spice up our content a little bit. Instead of just a blog post this time, you're going to get a little video. I think it was on Wistia, so not even a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know what? That sounds like a great way to start evolving, start doing some new stuff. So I shot a video, figured out how to light myself, almost set my dorm on fire. It's fine. And put that up on the blog. And then with the next one, I just started getting steadily more and more interested in YouTube. So in between videos 1 and 2, I went and watched a bunch of YouTubers. And I'm kind of a nerd, so I watched a bunch of video game reviewers and a bunch of people who did all kinds of stuff in that realm.
Yeah.
And I got a bunch of inspiration from those kind of guys and the editing that they did. So for my next video, I was like, all right, let's try to find a way to relate a college topic to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, one of my favorite games. I came up with the idea of doing a video on whether or not you're ready for college based on the grind meter in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and how like if you're right in the middle, you're ready to go.
Yeah, I know.
And if you're either on the side, like there's 2 reasons that you wouldn't go. Either you're totally not ready or you just don't need it at all. And that was fun. And the editing process for that video was so much fun that I realized I liked making videos more than I liked writing and podcasting. So I just started doing that as frequently, and then eventually became first and foremost a YouTuber. So really it was just me pursuing my interests and doing what was fun and, looking and seeing if it worked. And because those 2 things kind of aligned, I kept going.
With my podcast, I put up the audio for the show on my YouTube channel. I've just been posting it. What would you say? Do you think I should keep posting on there and also my podcast, or would you recommend also experimenting with YouTube and just making some separate content? Because a big thing, all of us know this, document versus create, is something Gary Vee talked about. I like that you may want to document your journey. People love to see behind the scenes. People like that. But also you made a point to the effect of you love to watch the finished product, the that you created. It's beautiful picture, beautiful video. You came out with that, you published it up. It's a lot of time, hours and hours of editing, everything. And that's a lot of fun to watch. Very entertaining. You can be proud of it. Your name is on it. It's your brand. Great. Now, for somebody like me, I'm tempted to go ahead and be like, look, I don't have a huge audience yet. And one thing I could do is document. And I think it would be fun. It'd be an outlet, a way to connect, show people behind the scenes. But I fear if I document my stuff, post it on my YouTube channel, that a guest might be deterred from wanting to be a guest on the show. Even though I have high profile guests, they may be deterred because they don't want to see me eating a bowl of cereal on my vlog
They're not going to even look.
I didn't think so.
Seriously. And hopefully I don't sound like a jerk for this, but when you reached out to me, well, you got the response from me, which was several months ago.
Yeah.
I didn't go check you out. I accepted the interview purely on the fact that you went and launched the podcast. You did 10 episodes. You came back and you were like, hey, I executed. I actually followed through. And I was like, cool. I don't need to know anything else. I will happily be a guest. And I think most people who are high profile, they're going to go off of, maybe some of them are going to go off the strength of your platform. I don't know. But I think a lot of them are going to go off of like, how do you reach out? How do you talk with them? That kind of thing. I don't think they're going to go scour your content to be like, does this guy eat food that looks messy? Because if he does, boy, oh boy, I'm not going to be part of this.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Where's the middle ground? There's probably some things I should document, but then there's some things that I should just go away like a little hermit crab and then come out with this, polished piece of work that everyone's going to enjoy. Mm-hmm. A channel like Tier Zoo, awesome channel on YouTube. I don't really care to watch his process. It might be sort of interesting, but the final product is so entertaining and so original that that's what people want to watch.
To his credit, he's all about getting people to take action, take that first step, take the leap. So documenting is just kind of a easier way to just get into creating content. So that could be as well what's going on with that.
Yeah. And you know what? I bet you that every point I just made against Gary, he's made against himself.
For sure. Yeah.
That's like the thing. If you watch enough of his content, you eventually find the nuance because he's very self-aware and he understands that when he makes a polarizing statement, there's always room to hem and haw legitimately. And he'll often do it. The problem is a lot of people don't really dig into all of his content. They just happen to see the highlight reels and they're just like, okay, work 16 hours a day, never sleep, document, don't create, never make a finished piece of art, and I'm going to be the next Gary Vee and have a shoe. And that's just not how it works.
No, that's a really good point. So transitioning now, Thomas, into your greatest success and your greatest failure. People want to know, hey, like, how did you keep going so consistently, over 4 years? And then share that if you would.
My greatest failure as an entrepreneur was the time I went about a year and a half in complete and utter stagnation. And this was actually right after I graduated from college. During that period of time, I was honestly kind of lazy with my content, but I wasn't publishing consistently. And if you go back and you look through the analytics and the income data, things were not growing. I was living your prototypical solopreneur guy life who had just established what quote unquote passive income and was sort of just like living off of it. I would attribute that to not having a clearly defined vision, which I gained after I read Debt Free You by Zach Bissonette, learned about the true cost of college and the struggle that a lot of people go through. And that combined with a lot of the feedback I was getting from my audience. But also, I was not treating myself as a professional. I was still almost doing the hobby thing. So after that year and a half period of stagnation, I decided to get really serious. I read the book, The Motivation Hacker by Nick Winter, which I think is a fantastic read for anybody who wants to become better at consistently following their habits and more motivated on a daily basis. I signed up for a tool called BeMinder, which tracks your goals and will actually take your money from you if you don't do them. And I told myself, and I made this accountable on BeMinder, I'm going to publish one podcast and one blog post every single week. And if I don't, I'm going to lose money. And then when I started the YouTube thing, I just tacked that on. All right, one blog post, one podcast, one YouTube video every week. Otherwise, I'm losing money. Wow. That was really successful for a long time. And you can start to see all of the charts go up at that point. I think 6 months later, I published my first book. And that was because I set a hard and fast 500-day per word writing goal for that book. And I was on the hook for that as well. I started to use accountability in these commitment devices, and that was very, very helpful for me. So I think structure is helpful. I got through that. Luckily, the failure was not like I was broke or anything. I don't have like a I was broke story.
Right, but actually, to cut you off, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'll cut you off because when you get into a rut like that or whatever you call it, it really is. It's horrible. It's horrible because you made all this progress up to this point. You're like, oh, I achieved this goal. I got some passive income, whatever that is. And then you're like, oh, what do I do now? I think Tim Ferriss talks about that too, of course, in one of his books. It's like, oh, boredom is like the greatest enemy. And to your credit, you just made an epic video, guys. Check it out. It's called The 3 Ways to Get Out of an Unmotivated Rut on Thomas's channel, Thomas Frank's YouTube channel. So check that one out. I really enjoyed that. I actually sent it to my buddy Brad, and he really liked it too. But yeah, there's just this sick anxiety, this restlessness that comes with that you touched on there.
I definitely felt that I wasn't living up to my potential, and I was almost doing the people who followed me a disservice by not working hard enough. I wasn't taking it seriously. So greatest success, and there's been a lot of, the one that sticks out in my mind was getting the opportunity to produce a Crash Course series.
Cool.
This sticks out in my mind because the channel Crash Course was one of my big inspirations for getting into YouTube. They make, in my opinion, some of the best educational content that exists on YouTube. I was watching their world history series and their biology series for a really long time. And, they have millions of subscribers. So starting out on YouTube, I'm sitting there with my 200 and I'm like, man, wouldn't it be cool to someday be on Crash Course? But you see them as like these gods of the pantheon, which is really silly. Now that I've learned, the subscriber number doesn't mean they're going to act like a god of the pantheon. They're actually just like nerdy people who are pretty good at media production and business. And, hopefully I come off that way and not as some sort of Greek god pantomime. Several years went by, and just slowly but surely, I just took little actions that I thought might get me closer to that goal. I found ways to sort of on the internet meet Hank Green and some of the people who worked with Crash Course. And then eventually my second VidCon, I signed up for this mentor session. And I don't know if it was random or not, but I was placed with Hank Green and I got to talk with him for about half an hour. And then at the end of that session, as I'm walking out, I said, by the way, Hank, what about a Crash Course study skills? And he says, well, write me a script and send it to me and we'll see what happens. And the funny thing is I spent 6 months like paralyzed, afraid to write an imperfect script and didn't get it to him. And one day I just sat down, I wrote the whole thing in one day. I sent it to him and apparently he had forwarded to his team and the team got really excited. And I was expecting that they would say, all right, we're going to do this like in 2 years. They came back and said, hey, it's January. Could we like launch this series for August, next semester? So I spent the rest of, that 6 month period writing an entire curriculum, writing 10 episode scripts, and then flying to Missoula twice to film them. And then that series actually did launch in August of 2017. And that was it was so cool seeing that come true, because I've never been the kind of person who's like, I want to be an astronaut. So I think like the Crash Course thing was my biggest goal, and seeing it happen was really cool.
Let's go ahead into the Heart Healthy Hustle round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and 3 questions based off of the title here. So for the first category, it's heart. What activity, Thomas, do you use to care for your internal character?
That's a good question. I don't know if I use a specific activity to care for my internal character, though that is something that is very important to me. I don't do anything like meditation. I think the closest thing that I could name to a specific activity is just having a lot of very honest and open discussions with both my girlfriend and my close friends and my parents. I think those help to keep me grounded, and they help to maintain those relationships that I care a lot about. Other than that, there's a lot of reading that is done. There's a lot of contemplation that's done, but I wouldn't say that I have like a specific activity that I go to as a way to take care of my mental health.
Physical health. Next category is health. So how do you maintain your physical health and avoid burnout?
I do everything. Figure skating, skateboarding, snowboarding, cycling, gymnastics. I'm training to go on an American Ninja Warrior. I do parkour, skateboarding. Did I say that one already? Basketball, jogging, weightlifting. I am fascinated and have so much fun with so many different sports. I can't really choose one. So I do them all.
I love that. Yeah, just kind of running with the interest there. Recently picked up a tennis racket again. I was never very good, but for some reason, I'm so competitive. Me and my friend were going to go play basketball. And I live in a nice town. There's a lot of really nice town parks, and they have basketball courts, tennis courts, a lot of tennis courts. And I always look at the tennis, I stink at tennis, whatever. But he's like, hey, you want to play tennis? I was like, I don't have a racket. And he's like, I got an extra one. I was like, oh boy. So yeah, I love that you do all that, Thomas. I
should try tennis as well.
So fun. And the reason I say that is because the competitive nature of it. And it gives you like another thing. Like if I go to the basketball courts and they're all taken, you go to the gym, all the courts are taken, whatever it is, you can have that like, oh, there's still like an extra tennis court. Cool. So we can do that. But the cardio, it's not like hit cardio. It's like a low level, steady hum where you're just going to like slowly sweat for like an hour, 2 hours, however long you play. I love it. I've never been so engaged mentally with how the ball's coming in and how to hit it and all this stuff. It's really fun. You're a guy who enjoys movement. So
Absolutely, yeah. That's the best way to put it.
So for Hustle, what's your main motivation for doing what you do?
It's progress. It's almost like a video game character leveling up. I love to see other people progress and gain new abilities, and I love to see myself do the same thing. I'm the kind of person that cannot stand stagnation. It's, I think, probably the number one reason that I don't want to work in a normal job. I love to be able to forge my own path, and I love seeing a new challenge off in the distance and then seeing if I can do it. That really informs a lot of my decisions. For example, I have been intending to make a course for quite some time, and I know that I could make more money by doing it myself. I know the email funnels, I know all that stuff, but instead I'm pursuing the opportunity of doing it with another company, producing it with them, and putting it on their platform, both for the reason that I think it's going to make it more accessible to students who don't have a whole lot of money, but also because that is a new challenge for me. I'm like, well, I'm going to have to go out and fly out to this place, and I'm going to have to learn the production techniques and workflow of their company. I'm sure there's something new I can pick up there, something I haven't done before that I don't know if I can do, which is great.
Touching back on physical health, Thomas, you may have heard of this. Have you heard of Rolfing? ROLFING.
Rolfing? I haven't, actually.
It's essentially 10, don't quote me on any of this, but if you look up Rolfing, ROLFING, Rolf technique is by Ida Rolf. Basically, it's a deep tissue massage, but they work with you in sessions. So there's like a series of 10 sessions, and then by like the 10th one, you're supposed to have gone through like some emotional releases, whatever, because of all the myofascial tissue and all that connective tissue, like releasing all of those holds that you have in your body. I'm really curious about it. So being a fellow guy who's into all these sports and movement, you may really enjoy that.
Interesting. Okay.
For sure. So yeah, share with my audience your 3 most influential books and why.
So I'm going to name the Motivation Hacker by Nick Winter. I mentioned that before. That was the book that kicked off the whole cycle of change in 2014. That helped me get serious and take my work as a professional should. So I recommend that book. And I think it's something that not a whole lot of people are going to recommend, which is kind of cool. So one of the big books that was very influential on me is actually a fan fiction called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. So this guy, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who is a artificial intelligence researcher and one of the internet's foremost writers on rationality and heuristics and biases, decided to write his own Harry Potter fan fiction as a way to teach people about all of those said things, heuristics and biases and human rationality. But it also happens to be, at least in my opinion, a very interesting and well-written story. And I read that, and that sort of just like opened my mind up to learning about rationality, learning what the bugs in my own brain were and how to deal with them. It's kind of crazy how much my thinking has evolved, how much my empathy has evolved, how much my ability to, just listen better has evolved due to not just that book, but some of the follow-up reading I was able to do. So they have this concept, and it's not in the book, it's just in one of his articles, where the human brain is what they call a lens that can see itself. So essentially we have this capacity for self-reflection. And I think the more you learn about how your mind works, the better your ability for self-reflection becomes, and the better your ability to practice self-reflection in the moment becomes. And that has been very, very helpful for me. I think it is actually one of the reasons that I still am in the relationship that I'm in, because I've been in situations where I know I would have responded one way as a younger and stupider man, and I have learned to not respond in that way. So that's been very influential on me. And if you want something that isn't a fan fiction, go read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. That's like the businessy version of that kind of a book. Though I think Yudkowsky might have written his own actual nonfiction book at this point as well that you could look into. Book number 3. Actually, you know what I did recently? I just put up a video called 6 Books That Changed My Life, and I'm trying to remember which ones I mentioned in there. I think I'm going to put The Happiness Equation by Neil Pasricha. That book just sort of helped me to shift my expectations for life. And one of the things that it did for me is change my perception of retirement as a concept.
Okay.
And I think the 4-Hour Work Week also did this, but The Happiness Equation was the thing that did it best, where I started to view retirement as like this false concept that shouldn't be the thing we're striving for. Why would we strive to stop working, stop growing, and stop struggling for 20 or 30 years at the end of our lives? Because work and change and struggle and growth are the things that keep us alive.
That's so true.
So maybe I want to strive for a happier life with work that's more fulfilling to me, but I never want to strive for a life where I never have to work again.
Yeah.
And maybe that reason isn't financial, paying the bills, but there's got to be some sort of compelling reason to keep changing and working and growing.
For sure. And that kind of goes back to, I always tell people, for me, I'm addicted to achievement. The Heart Healthy Hustle Round, you mentioned progress. You love to see others progress, and you love to see yourself do the same thing. So before we close out the show, Thomas, I love to ask people this question, especially tech-savvy individuals such as yourself. If you could think of your favorite tech, software tools you recommend using, it could be paid or free, that you really have had a nice ROI for you.
Yeah. The most recent one's probably Notion, which is in many ways a replacement for Evernote. And it's got some really cool database features in it, and it has some great collaboration features. So that's been really cool for me. On the health front, Strava is great. It's something that makes me love going out and riding my bike for longer and pushing myself for greater speeds and things like that. Strava, and it is for runners and cyclists. And I think you can also do swimming. And then one thing that I've also been using, so I tried Blue Apron a couple of years ago, and it was kind of good for learning how to cook, but it had the same problem that actually cooking has, where the ingredients come and then you're like, oh, I would rather be working instead of spend like an hour and a half figuring out how to cook this frittata. So a friend of mine recently showed me something called Freshly, which is the same thing, except for they just ship you meals that are already made. I like calling it subscribing to leftovers, because it's kind of what it is. Like, they're not frozen and they're not as good as a home cooked meal, but they're still good, and they only take me 3 minutes to make. So I've been doing that for a few weeks, and it gives me a lot more time to actually work. It's like an ROI thing, right? And I think that's why it came to mind, because you mentioned the word ROI. It's like $10 a meal. And I think when I cook, it usually ends up being like $6 or $7 a meal. So I'm like, all right, I'm spending $3 to save myself an hour of time. Totally worth it. And I'm not ordering out, which costs way more.
And you have more control over what you're ingesting as well.
Yes, they're really healthy. Yeah, all their meals are really healthy. Like if they send you like a pasta, a lot of times it's like squash pasta, stuff like that. So it's pretty good.
Awesome, Thomas. This has been a really informative interview. Almost everything you're recommending, I haven't heard of. So I'm excited to look into this stuff.
Nice.
Absolutely. So this is a pretty deep question. So you only share what you're comfortable sharing. That's fine. But try to imagine you're speaking to yourself 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. What would you say to a lonely or even isolated entrepreneur? So a real business owner, they're actually doing stuff. They're actually making some income. They're actually helping and serving many people, providing a lot of value. They're really out there giving it their all. Share your maybe a number one tip for connecting with other entrepreneurs.
I mean, the biggest thing that has helped me, honestly, is going to events. Though another thing that I'll add, as I'm thinking right now, starting a podcast actually is the reason why I know a couple of my very best friends in the world who also happen to be successful entrepreneurs. I started my podcast and I made an interview show like you're doing now. I reached out to these two guys that were doing this money podcast. And I said, hey, I like your show. You should come on my show and do a personal finance episode for students. I think that was my 20th episode. And those two guys ended up becoming best friends. I go on Skype with them every Thursday. I actually moved to Colorado, so now I live in the same city basically as one of them. And I have stayed at the apartment of the other one in New York City many, many times. I cat sit for him whenever they go on vacation now. Podcast was a great way to break that ice and connect with people. But not everyone's going to start a podcast. So get yourself out to events, even if it's something in your local community. Like my city in Des Moines, Iowa has something every Wednesday called 1 Million Cups. And I think there's like a bunch of 1 million cups events in many, many, many cities around the world. And if there's not, you can start your own because it's an organization where you can start. It's just like an organization for entrepreneurs. Every Wednesday morning, there's one person who presents what they're doing for feedback and questions, and everyone else is just there to network. It's great.
I like that.
And it's
I really
casual.
like that. I go to networking events. I go by myself on purpose. Usually I'll have a friend who does also arrive. I'll dress down, and I don't necessarily recommend this. I do it just so it just goes against the grain of what if people are wearing their boxed suit, so to speak, and they're in the event, walking around, trying to look good, impress people. Whereas I'll go into the middle of the room and I'll stand there and I just won't say anything. I won't do anything. I'll just like look around the room and just breathe and check where I'm like holding all of my anxiety and like, why am I uncomfortable? Is it because I feel like people are looking at me? And I try to focus out on other people. That's a comfort challenge. Great recommendation. So 1 million cups sounds really cool too. I'd love to try something like that.
Yeah. And I guess if I can add one more thing, see if you can find a way to steer the conversation towards what the people that you're talking to like to do for fun. Because one thing I've noticed as I've gotten quote unquote more successful as an entrepreneur is you get busier. And the problem is that when other people want to meet you as entrepreneurs, a lot of times the first thing that they suggest is like you work together in some way. And I'm like, I don't have time to work together in some way. Like I've already got 50,000 projects on my plate that I'm ignoring enough as it is. I can't work with you. So like it's so tempting to just sort of like blow you off because I feel like there's nothing else I can do. But if I were at an event and someone was like, hey, I freaking love snowboarding. I'm like, wait a minute, you're a cool entrepreneur who also likes snowboarding. Well, let's go snowboarding, dude. Like this is not even a debate. We're doing it. So if you can find ways to become real, actual friends with these people, who knows? Maybe there's something that you can do business-wise in the future, but I think the friendships are more rewarding anyway.
I love that. I agree with that 100%. That's really what it's about. Connection, just enjoying your life. I really do like that because it frees you from having to feel like, oh, what am I going to get from this person? Or what can I give to this person? Or what are they going to think? It's like, it doesn't matter. Just try to enjoy each other. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. There's billions of people in the world. Cool. So last question, Thomas. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self and why?
Nothing, because butterfly effect.
I've been waiting for somebody to say that. You're the first person to say that. It's funny. Is that your answer? Really?
I'd screw myself up. Seriously. Like, right. I don't know. I'm very happy where I am.
Yeah.
I would just say be more empathetic. You know, it took me a while to learn it, to listen, to try to see problems that other people have from their perspective, not my own. And you know, I think that has less likelihood of screwing up things through butterfly effects than anything else. And I think it would be beneficial to other people as well.
One word to share with already successful entrepreneurs such as yourself. So share with somebody, let's say a peer who's at your level. Maybe they're listening and they're like, yeah, but I kind of have to protect myself, guard against like these fake friendships. I'm relatively a public figure. What would you share with that person? Can you think of anything to connect?
Like one word?
Word of encouragement or a suggestion for finding more true connection and without worrying about basically just being catered to because of your certain status.
Maintain the relationships that you had before you became successful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing, you know? The cool thing is that all of my friends that I've had for a long time, they don't really treat me a whole lot different.
Good. Yeah.
And I don't treat them any differently. Just, you got to stay grounded.
With that, we'll end the interview. Thomas, share with my audience your website, what you're up to, projects you're working on.
Yeah. So you can connect with me, Instagram and Twitter. I'm Tom Frankly over there. collegeinfogeek.com for my website, or just youtube.com/ThomasFrank. And I'm working on more videos, all kinds of other cool stuff, but more videos is going to be the thing that you will be seeing on, you know, instantly if you decide to follow me. That's what I'll promise.
I want to acknowledge you, Thomas, for bringing out the real content that you do. It's very actionable, so I enjoy it because of that. I'm very a proactive individual. It's very helpful. If you're not even a student, you're just a business owner and you want to have some productivity hacks and maybe even learn a few life lessons along the way, go to Thomas Frank's YouTube channel and his website. With that, guys, thank you, Thomas, for your time and for being a guest on today's show.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's been really cool to see that you stuck with the podcast. Like I said, and I wasn't kidding when I say a lot of people reach out to me who haven't launched them yet. And then I check back a few months later and they did like one episode or never launched. So it's cool to see that you have done at least 10, probably more at this point, and just keep at it, man. It's been awesome.
Thanks, man.
And I like the format, especially the questions about heart, healthy, and hustle. It was cool because like as somebody who's really into the health stuff, I was just like excited for that question to come up. Yeah.
I'm still growing my wings. Before I let you go, I'd love to ask you, what would your number one tip be? Because my mentality right now is, hey, I don't need to monetize this. I'm just enjoying meeting people, learning, growing, putting up good polished content, getting better and better and better, and delivering on that promise consistently. That's completely my approach. With each interview, like you said, you connect with more people. It's a blast. So anything you could add to that formula that would help me in my future success with it?
Reach out to your former guests from time to time just to ask how things are going.
Great point.
That would be it.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Just maintain those relationships, because I think most podcast guests don't hear back from the hosts of the shows that they go on, and they understand it. It's like I went on there. They wanted to talk with me, I'm sure, but they were also getting content. So I think you could really differentiate yourself by being the guy that actually reaches back out.
Again, man, I meant it when I said I acknowledge your content, man. You are really helping a lot of people, as you know.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me on the show and for the great chat.
Thank you for listening to the Heart Healthy Hustle podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I want to say thank you. And also, I want you to ask yourself why. What about this episode really stood out to you? I want to challenge you to take action on that thing. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate your time and consideration to go ahead and leave a helpful review on iTunes, so it really helps the podcast grow and we can impact even more people who need this. Thank you guys for all of your support, and I will see you in the next episode.